My presentation is going to be on the role of women in the Mahabharata and comparing it to modern feminism in India. So, to introduce my topic, my question was, how does the role of the women in the Mahabharata relate to the feminist movement in India and the changing role women play in society? There are many different perspectives I took to look at the role of women in the Mahabharata and in India. And I looked at this a lot through different types of historical literature and how women's roles were laid out in historical literature and how people analyzed that. In the Mahabharata, many women are seen standing up for themselves and being portrayed as strong and intelligent. But then on the flip side, there are also many moments where they are doubted or they're being shown as being seen lesser to men, as this was a pattern throughout the Mahabharata, as it is as a old text, it's a historical text, and women were not seen as equal to men during this time. And then literature such as this could be seen as just the beginning for greater freedoms on the horizon. Many gender roles were broken during the Mahabharata, and this could lead to normalizing women having a larger role in society. So this is kind of the thought process I used when creating my essay. So I have my first point, or my first set of ideas, which is a lot around the character of Draupadi. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she was a woman that had kind of a bigger role than some of the other women in the book. And she showed different examples of the Mahabharata when women were either doubted or they were shown in power. She has scenes that showcase both. So she was a really good character to really hone in on and analyze for the points I wanted to make. So she was told that she was dangerous because she was too beautiful, and she shouldn't be around men. But she also tried to stand up for herself when her husband tried to put her, or people tried to put her into exile after her husband had bet on her, and she tried to fight back, saying she had just as much power as her husband being in the throne. And I thought this was a really important moment because it showed a woman standing up for herself and speaking up, and we don't see this a lot, although we do see women being very important in the roles of men's lives. We don't see a lot of just a woman standing up for herself. And then later in the book, after exile, she was told she could not be a servant due to the fact that she was a woman and she wasn't strong enough. But she had just gone through the same things that the people who were becoming servants she had gone through the same things that they had gone through. She was just as strong as them, yet she was doubted. And then my next point was the feminist movement over time in India. I really honed in on a certain book that kind of laid out the feminist movement starting in the 1800s. And basically, the book laid out that the feminist movement has gone through many ups and downs throughout time, just as many other feminist movements have gone through. It's a very hard battle to go through, and just like the other movements, it had been many ups and downs. There were different symbols used. There were different ways to try and fight back. Some things worked, some things didn't. They changed their ideology and their slogans and what they were fighting for often to try and find their niche, to try and find what would get a grasp by the public eye. And in the end of the book, the author really said that the point of the women's movement, they wanted to be seen as meaningful members of society. They wanted to be recognized as people that meant something to the men around them and to their children. I think that they were described as very not ideal or not well off in society. They were seen as not needed, but really at the end of the day, they tried to prove that they were. And one of the ways they did this was with the role of the mother and showing how mothers were so important in their children's lives. And that leads me to my last point, which is the Mahabharata and women's freedoms. I used Draupadi often a lot with this. She also just wanted to be seen as needed. She wanted to be seen as vital to society. And I think that when she stands up for herself, she was trying to show that she is vital. And along with this, So the role of the mother was used very often in the movement early on, not in later times of the movement, but early on in the movement. And this can be compared to the heroism aspect in the epic of the Mahabharata. Many of the characters, mostly the male, were compared, and the question brought up was like, what is a hero? And I think that you can compare this to the role of the mother. The role of the mother, they wanted to be framed as someone that's needed, as someone who helps people. And a hero can often be shown as someone who helps people. And so I compared these 2 points by saying that women wanted to be seen as helpful, just as many of the characters wanted to be framed as helpful and as heroes throughout the Mahabharata. This next slide is a quote I wanted to use. This is from the Mahabharata on page 199, and this is from Draupadi, and she says, "Lords of the earth, where is the honor in this hall? Where is Dharma? Time must be out of joint when such outrages can be enacted unprovoked, unchallenged. I am the wife of Yudhishthira, equal to him in rank." And I wanted to share this quote and really highlight it because I thought that it really showcased one of her best moments when she was standing up for herself. And I think that although this was rare, this was such a powerful moment. And although, it was small and it could be missed by many people, just a blip in the book. It's a very long book. It was so important, and it can be looked back at by other people and seen as something, as a woman being powerful and standing up for herself in a historical religious text. This next slide is the sources I used. I wanted to highlight them because I thought they were really important for the research I did. The first is obviously the Mahabharata. I used quotes mostly from women and just different scenes that had women in them that highlighted the different points I wanted to make. The History of Doing. This is a book that laid out the feminist movement in India starting in the 1800s and ending around 1910, I want to say, or maybe 1990. And it basically gave a timeline and laid out the feminist movement in the different waves it went throughout its time. And it went through many ups and downs, but it gave me a lot of different points and angles to use when comparing it to the Mahabharata. The next book is Gender and Narrative in the Mahabharata. This was a book that really talked a lot about like what gender meant in the Mahabharata and how it was used as a tool to tell the story, and how really like the idea of a hero and the idea of like males being heroes and women needing to be saved and things like that. Women as Fire, Women as Sage. This was a book that talked a lot about sexuality and being a woman in the Mahabharata. I think I used this book the least. I think it gave me just a better understanding of the female characters. I didn't get a lot of my research from here. I think I just got more whole understanding of the female characters, since we didn't get a lot from the readings sometimes on certain female characters. And then the last was a journal I used called The Presentation of Women in Literature from Past to Present. This gave a lot of times when how women were described throughout literature. It talked a lot about Hindu literature. It talked about American literature and how women were described, how that they stood up for themselves, how they didn't stand up for themselves. And I use this as kind of a tool to talk about how different how like in the Mahabharata women did stand up for themselves, and this wasn't seen very often. I was able to compare it to how other women were described in other pieces of literature.